Hi, you're with IndiaPostLive.com. I'm Ishan Russell. India Post Live is, of course, India's first online streaming news conversational web TV. So you too can be part of this conversation. And today we're talking about, well, I should have really suited up for this one. We're talking about How I Met Your Mother, how that show has really changed an entire generation, and how American sitcoms have slowly but surely affected our lives. How have they done so? First, you take a look at this story. While the TV series Friends made cafes hugely popular for the past decade, another series, How I Met Your Mother, has changed the traffic from cafes to pubs. That just shows how American sitcoms have been exerting its soft power to its viewers across the world. These sitcoms have incredibly influenced lives, especially of the youth and young adults who take cue from characters in the shows. Barney's catchphrases like awesome, legend, wait for it, dairy, suit up, and true story are living proof that these sitcoms affect our language.
You met Ted?
Have you met Ted? Legend. Wait for it. Wait for it. Wait for it.
Which character do you like in
Barney Stinson. It was the way he acts in that, the way he says legend, wait for it, dairy. It kind of makes the show more interesting.
Popular American shows like Friends, Seinfeld, How I Met Your Mother, and Big Bang Theory are shaping our lives and the way we look at entertainment. Perhaps it's time the likes of Ekta Kapoor took a cue from the sitcoms and moved beyond the Saas Bahu serials. So how are these sitcoms affecting our lives, your lives? If you have a comment, please do join us. It's hashtag IndiaPostLive for your tweets, and IndiaPostLive.com is the name of the website. You can go over there, log in, post your comments. Even if you want to join us via Skype and ask our experts anything, you're most welcome to. Today in the studio we have with us Komal Mathur. She's a counselor, a transactional analyst, a person who helps people out and who understands society, so to say. So Komal, how would you see the sitcom effect, as we are calling it? How much do American sitcoms affect the lives of teenagers and young adults in India?
We're basically talking about urban India.
Yes.
So people who can relate to this kind of phenomenon, as you call it. But overall, I think it's a great effect for whoever is watching, whoever is connecting with it, because it gives them a different way of looking at things. It's a different way of thinking, different way of relating to friends, to family, how to be in relationships, and basically the whole openness that you get from connecting with something. It seems like it's larger than your life. There's this group of friends, they're doing interesting things, they're talking about interesting things. The outcomes are unexpected sometimes, and there is a place to hang out. And that in itself creates a culture of its own, whether it's a cafe, whether it's a pub, whether it is the living room of some place. But the idea of a community, an idea of group of people that you can relate to, and they're always available to you. That, I think, is a valuable idea, because we've come from a culture which talks a lot about the strength of family, the strength of community, no matter where. And
for the first time, perhaps we're talking about the individual in terms of an individual being part of a larger social group, but then the moral values of the social group aren't that strictly defined, so to say.
That's right, because it's a motley crew, and everybody has a voice. That's very powerful. It's different from the family situation or a village or a community situation where everybody has a voice, but there is one larger parental voice that prevails. And over here, what they're saying is that each person can have an opinion, each person can have an individual way of doing things, and you can have fun while you're doing whatever you're doing. That's how I see the effect of it.
All right, but there would be those on the other side saying that this alienates our urban youth from the Indian cultural values, or, I mean, they want to be more westernized, so to say, as the allegation often goes. How would you counter that?
But aren't we already quite westernized? The language that we are speaking in right now is English. It's not the native language. So we are in many ways a culture that has moved in leaps and bounds over a period of many years. And I think the goal is not so much Western or Eastern, it's global. Whether it's the business culture, whether it is the home, whether it's how you relate to people. We're looking at being global citizens, people of the world, rather than of one small little dot on the map of the world.
All right, but how do you think that now the change also means that the young people are often very alienated or often very individualistic, and that leads to more problems? The kind of backup that they used to have traditionally in terms of a family, in terms of at least the values to fall back upon in case perhaps a relationship is going wrong, then now that kind of a safety net does not exist.
I agree with you that that safety net does not exist, but that may not be such a bad thing, because maybe a lot of people are just very used to safe spaces. And when we are talking about being different, being creative, looking at things from an out of box perspective, maybe it's time to let go of the safety. I don't think it's a bad thing that that safety net is not available. It also creates different aspects for communication. The fact that a son could have a different opinion from his parents, whether it is about the work that he wants to do, or a daughter about the marriage or the relationship, or vice versa. The fact that there are these different things possible, and somewhere someone who finds a sitcom and finds something in that that gives him or her the courage to speak, why not?
All right, are these sitcoms about identifying or aspiring to be? I mean, the point is that your normal life is really not like that in India. Perhaps how they show in these sitcoms in New York or in LA or wherever they're located. But your normal life isn't like that, and then you start behaving like that. Could it lead to behavioral deficiencies, so if I may, use that term?
Behavioral deficiencies don't necessarily have anything to do with how you relate to a sitcom. The background for a behavioral deficiency comes from childhood, from when you're growing up. By the time you're 7 or 8 years old, you've decided how you're going to behave and how you're going to relate and communicate with the others. Whatever you learn as you grow along, whether it's from books or it's from TV shows or it's from the education that you get, only adds to that foundation. And it has nothing really to do with alienating or individuating. It's about everyone's individual wish of how they want to be, what their goals are. So the aspect of alienating, I think it's a label, because what are we alienating ourselves from? Is it from a regular way of being? Do we want to be stuck in only one way of being, or do we want to have information and access to other ways of being and maybe experimenting?
All right, but for an entire generation, they really don't understand these sitcoms. The elder generation.
Who are you talking about?
I'm talking about, for example, my parents. My parents, they like watching these sitcoms. They enjoy the sense of humor, but there is a certain openness in the language that they're not all that comfortable with. Certain moral ideas that they're not that comfortable with. And as a counselor, do you get many cases like these where the generation gap, so to say, is that wide that the communication becomes difficult for a child trying to be completely different from where his parents have come from, and the parents not being able to understand that?
The generation gap has existed for centuries. TV is just one aspect, and you can have a generation gap and the stuck communication because of anything. It could be about how you want to plant the garden, and whether you want to go and marry someone else or you want to go out and have a drink. The fact that two generations have different opinions is a given. So to say that it's because of the television shows and because of that there is a discomfort. Overall, if there is stuck communication, it'll come up with the TV shows also. So in my opinion, it's not the TV shows that are causing it or are leading to that. At any stage, if there is anything that you want to change in your life, whether it is the way you behave, the way you interact, your relationships with your parents or communication, it's all to do with what your goal is and how you want to go beyond that. And to say that because of television my son doesn't talk to me, or because of television my daughter now has decided that she's not going to get married and she's going to be a waitress, well,
Well, that's the reality that one has to perhaps live with in this day and age of 2014. The millennial
Exactly.
generation is here. But what do you think about the sitcom effect, as we are calling it, the cultural shift from cafes to pubs to next, you don't know what, whichever sitcom becomes popular, how that becomes ingrained in our culture. But what are your comments about it? We'd love to hear from you. Hashtag India Post Live to your tweets and log on to indiapostlive.com, the website, and just log in and post your comments over there. Also, if you want to join us via Skype, you're most welcome to ask our expert anything over here. But Komal, as far as the Indian sitcoms go, now they're catering to a completely different generation, creating a whole new set of ideas, moral values, understanding, and you look at American sitcoms and the generation that is watching those, it's completely different. So sitcoms certainly, in a way, are influencing both generations.
Yes.
And does that lead to any kind of a conflict between the generations, or that conflict does exist no matter what?
Conflict is there. In fact, if there is a sitcom that everybody is watching, it could open up communication and conversation. Conflict is a given. Without conflict, nothing moves forward. I mean, if the father says this is the right way to do things and the son says, Ji Huzur, nothing happens. It still goes on the same way. The fact that there are things that cause conflict, that give food for thought for both, is great. And it's different. And whether it's an Indian sitcom or it's an American sitcom, it's offering a certain view of life. It's offering a certain box that people are huddled around and watching a particular story. And that's it, it's a story. How you relate to it is very individual.
All right, but that individuality has also led to a very perceptive change in Indian society. The fact that dating is now more common, and being in a relationship, or perhaps even a live-in
Do
relationship.
you know the story of Heer Ranja?
No,
They were dating centuries ago.
yeah, that way they were, but in the traditional sense, the date has become more like a Hollywood movie, and the entire paraphernalia around that date has completely changed, hasn't it?
As things are available, you have cards, you have flowers, you can go to a pastry shop and order this fancy cake which declares I love you, and you can go for a candlelight dinner. You don't have to cook at home. All of those things are available. What came first? It's more like a chicken and egg story. So the fact is that all of these things are a reality of our life. We have business opportunities. We have MNCs where people want to work and they want to send their MBA educated kids to, and the kids themselves have that. Then there are all kinds of educational opportunities available. So our world has widened, and the culture requires to evolve along with that. Values, there isn't a set Indian value that is now prevalent. Values are individual to people as well as groups, families. So everything is around that. What the larger picture available is this whole new world, which is different from what it was, say, 25 years ago. But the seeds for this change, were planted 25 years ago. So maybe it's a good idea to have a conversation with someone. Like, I would qualify for being around. I am now 52 years old. I have kids in their 20s, and my views have grown, not just with TV, but the whole range of information available. The internet was not there. You have web TV today. So it's a different world altogether. I'm very happy to grow along with my children and learn from them. They come back with different things. So it's great. I mean, it's great. The sitcoms are there. They provide you laughs. They provide you a lighter way of looking at things.
All right, and indeed a fresh perspective,
Yes,
so to say.
exactly.
But given the fact, I mean, you've been interacting, I'm sure you interact with a lot of young people.
I
So
do.
the influence of Bollywood on young India, young urban India, I'm talking about the South Delhi kids, the South Mumbai kids. Has that gone down, or, I mean, because they certainly seem to identify the language, the slang, the way of dressing is more American, so to say, than any other culture.
I think kids today are more savvy than, say, I was 25 years ago. Uh, they know that this is a movie and they know that this is a TV show. If you're talking about the savvy Bombay, Delhi youth, they definitely know. You're not talking about somebody who's not informed. There is a lot of information available and people are accessing it. So it's great. I mean, it's not so much as, in my opinion, life informs all of these. Life informs Bollywood, life informs TV. So it's not that TV is here that has come and changed things drastically. The change is already there in the way people think and in the dreams and the wishes that they have. It's not that because there is a TV show that now suddenly people have decided that they're going to go to pubs. The pubs have been around. Bangalore has had pubs, Bombay has had pubs, and Delhi is now getting a lot more pubs. And there are different ways that people are using the spaces available to them.
All right, but then where does the original self go? I mean, I'm sure parents watching this would say, but my kid is not an American teenager. He does not have the same lives. He does not have the same responsibilities. He does not have the same pressures, and it's very different. So why identify with that? Why not identify with the Shah Rukh Khan who made it big in India?
I'm sure there are a lot of people, and I'm sure there are a lot of parents who are wishing, gosh, I wish this was available to us when we were kids. I certainly do. For so many things, I think that, wow, I wish this had been around. Especially this open culture with friends, where you can relate to people and talk about anything in a space which has nothing to do with, okay, ab uske ghar jana hai. Is it okay to speak Hindi?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. Now I have to go there and sit with friends or go and sit in a park. There are other avenues available, and when you're in different environments, you relate to yourself differently, and I think it's great.
How much has social media affected all these interactions? Because it certainly seems to be the fact that if 5 of my friends are watching a show and are writing something on Facebook about it, then I also have to watch that show and write something about it to at least be part of that peer group. Isn't that so? Hasn't social media also added to that pressure of conformity, so to say?
Is it a pressure of conformity that this is about?
Isn't it? What would you call it?
Okay. I would say everybody wants to be part of the whole thing. It is something which is different from your regular life. I mean, if you take, say, an average teenager, early 20s, you have studies, you have home, you have friends, and you have things to do around that. There's X amount of time. And in that much time, if there is this little half hour or 1 hour, I think everybody wants to just experience something different. It's a story. It's something which is about fun and laughter. And sure, there is a sense of, okay, everybody is watching it, so let me see.
All right, so let's see what our kids of this generation have to say. Some students are joining us from the Lady Shri Ram College in New Delhi. Hi, if you could just have your names, and what would you have to say about these sitcoms and how they've defined your generation? For example, How I Met Your Mother. Has that really changed the way you think or talk?
Okay, hi. I'm Diksha from Lady Shri Ram College for Women, and considering we're talking a lot about globalization here and how sitcoms are affecting our generation, very frankly, what I believe is that it provides a platform for both, whether it's a good impact or a negative impact. And considering that we moved forward from, say, the age of entertainment, where they were primarily for the purpose of entertainment, to a more utilitarian perspective on the sitcom, which is what I'm talking about right now. I think the fact that they influence us on a day-to-day basis, like a daily life basis, is much more concrete than, say, a movie, which would be a random snap at some point in time. You watch it and then you're disconnected from the entire thing. How I Met Your Mother, the sitcom that we're primarily focusing on, is now raged because, well, everybody was postulating about how it's going to end. And then they came up with something that a lot of people felt disappointed by. I mean, personally, after the 5th season, I stopped following How I Met Your Mother because I was all like, meet the mother already, which they didn't. So, and then my friends and I, we've been following it for a long time, and then, well, the mother dies, and he ends up with the girl we always thought he'd end up with.
Spoiler alert for all our viewers. I was
I
saying
can't hear you.
I was saying that's a spoiler alert for all our viewers. So for those who haven't seen the final season,
Okay. Spoiler alert, must mention. I think it's a great paradox of sorts that while sitcoms through technology make us so disconnected from the people
if you
around
could
us.
just raise the camera a bit, we can't see your face. Hi. Yeah.
Yeah. Should I start from the beginning again?
Yeah, sure.
So my name is Payasini. I'm going to talk to you about the paradox that this sort of technology is fostering because on one hand we are glued to sitcoms all the time on our laptops and therefore it does not facilitate a kind of connection with other humans that we would want around us. But at the same time, these sitcoms through a common connection that it creates with other viewers of the same sitcom becomes a medium for a greater connectivity with other individuals. So it's a very different sort of a paradox where depending on how much emotional investment you're giving to these sitcoms, you can determine the range of connectivity that you can create via these. So for example, a fan of a sitcom like Big Bang Theory, through t-shirts or through merchandise can communicate about how she loves the show to others and then maybe start an entirely different tangent of conversation that wouldn't have happened otherwise with a complete stranger. So I think a lot about how you deal with sitcoms is to do with how much you invest yourself emotionally and in terms of energy and time into these. And if that's the way you think is the best way to connect to other individuals by talking to them about your favorite characters or shows, so be it. But if I can give you a very sociological perspective and talk to you about Manuel Castell's work, he tells us that too much investment into technology also isolates individuals and creates a very different sort of an identity. So I don't know how much of that we've experienced so far and how much of that part of the individual we've seen. But yes, in my generation for sure, we have very strict loyalties towards a lot of shows, which creates fandoms, which creates enemies also. So yeah, it is trivial at some levels, it's very strong at other levels. But
Alright.
I think for us in hostel especially, we do not have access to television. So these sitcoms also become our primary source of entertainment and release at the end of the day. So you will get very different perspectives from young people about this. So for those who do not have a regular access to laptop or internet, I don't think these sitcoms will really mean a lot to them because the way they are telecasted on television is very different from the way we see it in the laptops or through our personal viewing devices. So yeah, that's all I have to say.
All right, thanks so much for that opinion. We'll come back to you. I just want to get in Komal over here. Komal, very interesting, very informed opinions, I must say, that these young girls have. But and we have a couple of Twitter comments that have come in. Pavitra writes in that how would you define globalization with reference to the sitcom effect? And Snow Leopard writes in that sitcoms are okay, but the trouble is when people start following them blindly and lose their individuality in that process. There used to be somebody in school I knew, and Archie's comics were a rage at that point in time, and that person started, I mean, the expressions that were used, like Mr. Lodge used to say egard, and I mean, to use that in a normal conversation completely out of context, but then that is how it's shaping our lives, our language, our culture, isn't it? And you can't do anything about it.
Also, there is a certain age, especially during the teenage till the early 20s, when imaginations are fired by everything. All of these stories, the archetypes in the stories, the conversations, the dialogues, they're all very inspiring, and it is what people do as to ape, to see, to create an identity for themselves, about themselves. It's not that they become Mr. Lodge or they become Archie or now somebody is going to be Ted or Barney. But it's to see what fits, to learn, okay, this is something I can try out. Let me see if I can make this as part of my life. How does it work for me? So that experimentation too goes on. And it's something which is normal. And the difficulty lies when it becomes obsessive, when it becomes something which goes beyond a certain stage, or that becomes the entire focus. But as a part of normal, it's like a rite of passage. It's like a milestone, a developmental milestone, where you do pick up these things and you experiment and you see, okay. And as far as I agree with what this lady said about the emotional investment, it's all about how much you're invested. And along with the emotional investment comes the time. So if it is interfering with your regular life, then of course it's a problem. But otherwise, all of this is part of the whole process of growing up. And as far as the globalization context is, it is. We're looking at
The world's become
something.
flat.
Yeah, it's like, everybody wants to have the same coffee. Starbucks is here, and when I say everybody, it is about a certain
Right.
access that we're talking about. Like the lady from LSR said that it is about, they're talking about people who have internet, who have laptops.
So you have
and
to
things.
have
So
a
you're
basic-
looking at a certain very
who could
small
be as comfortable,
section.
who could be perhaps going to college the next year in the United States. But I'll give one final comment to you guys before I let you go. How would this be if, for example, How I Met Your Mother was made by Indian characters, they had the same storylines, but would you have followed the show as much as you did if it wasn't, if it was all Indians in it instead?
Okay, so that's a point even I wanted to make, especially considering how most sitcoms that we've been talking about are coming from a Western perspective, right? So the thing is, ma'am mentioned obsession, right? It becomes a problem when it's obsessive. I think there are very other things that people are obsessed with that are more harmful than sitcoms are.
Yeah.
Right, actions that people are grappling with at this stage, whether you talk about as adolescents or people older than us. So in a way, I think it's good to have an outlet like sitcoms, and in a manner it provides us with catharsis, and plus over and above that, sitcoms run on the industry that you aspire towards whatever character you're seeing. You want to be like that character. So in that way, you try and emulate that character. However, the idea is not to lose your individuality in the process.
All right.
I want to make a point here. I really don't think we're talking about globalization here because it is just sheer westernization and Americanization and perpetuating stereotypes. So even if you see the Indian characters in sitcoms like How I Met Your Mother or even Simpsons for that matter, the accent, the color of the skin, the food they eat, making fun of curries and elephants, it's just perpetuating a very different kind of stereotype, the way Americans look at us or the way, say, Britishers look at us. So calling it a globalization of culture would be wrong. I would only say that the middle class, which is the greater audience of these shows, has a lot of aspirational value attached to the American culture, which is why it's so easy for us to say that we connect to such characters very easily. So, at some level, we can contest how much of this globalization is helping us because we've grown up reading that culture through American classics. We've grown up reading Jeffrey Archer and Sidney Sheldon, so it's not like we weren't introduced to that culture before. Television has just made it easier for us to communicate that. And about the Indian shows having similar storylines, if you remember, there were shows like Sanjeevani and Dil Mil Gaye, which had very similar storylines about the youth coming together, working together, and then the romantic liaisons that followed. So even they were hugely popular when I was in school. Shows like Sara Bhai versus Sara Bhai were hugely popular as sitcoms in India also. What we lack in terms of maybe in Indian sitcoms is maybe a good script that appeals to this
All right.
elitist middle class youth that can connect to only and mad boys.
Alright.
That's what we're lacking, I think, which is why people don't think Indian sitcoms are classy enough. But yeah.
All right, girls, thanks very much for joining in, and I'd love to hear from you all the more often. I'm sorry you in the middle didn't get to comment this time around, but we absolutely ran out of time. But for sure, log on to indiapostlive.com and post your comments, and we'll continue this chat later. Or hashtag IndiaPostLive to your tweets, and you can join in this conversation. But Komal, interesting points that they make over there. As far as Indian culture also goes, perhaps you're trying to cater to too wide an audience, trying to play it too safe, and therefore we do not exceed our creative boundaries, and that is something that the creative people in India should perhaps have to think about, don't they?
It's interesting how the whole thing has now suddenly become about how the Indian sitcom needs to become something more than what it is right now. But essentially, I like what this girl said about there being an outlet. It's an outlet. Ultimately, it's a TV show. You spend some time on it, you laugh, you enjoy a few laughs, you think about it, and you have maybe a discussion, or you have a discussion like this, and then you let it work in the background and see how you ultimately it influences and how it informs your life. It's essentially about the choices that you make. Whether it is coming from a sitcom or it is coming from anything else, it's ultimately part of your education. It may be a tough education, or it may not be a normal, regular education as we thought about it, or as our parents, the previous generation, planned it out. But it is an education, and
It certainly is an education. At least you're more prepared for the world. At least you have cultural context. But and in this, I'd like to add that I think the Americans won it after the Cold War. I mean, you look at Russia these days. You look at any other of these Eastern European countries, and they've become more Americanized, more Westernized than the United States itself. And so perhaps India is not alone in that regard.
Apparently, the burger has hit Japan in a big way.
Yeah.
They never used to eat burgers. I mean, yes, you're right about it, that it has, whether you want to call it Western, you want to call it American, you want to call it global, but there is a certain identification with that standard that a lot of people make. And the effects are not just now, it's far reaching, and let's see what it becomes, how global or non-global it is. And also, we too, as Indians, whether it is in the sitcom field or education, we have a possibility of informing and influencing the whole area, the whole field. So that too is there, but unless we know what's happening out there in the world, it's very difficult to have an opinion which includes everything.
All right. We also have another Skype guest coming in. Ravi Chow joins us. Ravi is, of course, the owner of Flipside Cafe and Barsoom restaurant pub, one of the most popular ones in Hoskas Village, the new zone for eating out in Delhi. And they make some of the best crepes around. I've had some of those. Ravi, you owned a cafe, you still own a cafe, and you own a bar as well. How do you think, do American sitcoms affect Indian youth coming into your pubs and cafes? Do you think traffic has increased? The culture, as far as India is concerned, has changed because of that?
I think it definitely has an influence in terms of, there's definitely more and more people watching the modern shows that are coming out these days. And like what we did with Flipside Cafe, we made it a very cool, modern, European style cafe, So I think when people did come into that and kind of recognize that and maybe associated it with something very European or Western, they enjoyed the fact of that, and it made them come by more. And then of course there's always the pub culture, which is a very Western thing a lot more, and people are using that to their advantage, especially business owners, You make a good pub, a cool bar, somewhere that people want to hang out scene, and you will definitely get more footfall. So yeah, I definitely feel it has an influence. I wouldn't say an extremely strong one, but it does make a difference for sure.
All right, and as far as young kids, how young are the kids who come into bars these days? Because that's a problem that many parents would have, that my 15-year-old is watching a sitcom called How I Met Your Mother, and they're always sitting in a bar. So do you have a lot of young kids coming in who are perhaps under the drinking age?
There's a few, not too many though. We do get a few young people that try and come in, but they're not coming in to drink. It's mainly they're coming in to hang out, use their laptops, check out what's happening in Hoskas Village, maybe try and get a coffee, stuff like that. But a majority of the people we get are young professionals, above the age of 25-ish, even 23 to 30 kind of thing. That's the majority of people that we get in.
All right, and Ravi, because I want to understand this, because this is a very recent phenomenon that people have started spending more time. They're not just out there to eat and drink and go away. They're spending times. They're working out of cafes, out of pubs, out of restaurants. That somehow has certainly changed over the past 5-10 years, hasn't that?
Yeah, for sure. Back. Even 5-6 years ago, if you looked at Delhi life, restaurants and bars were places you went to when you wanted a meal or you wanted to drink, or maybe you wanted to get a cup of coffee or something like that. But now it's, especially with Flipside Cafe, because we're a very internet-friendly place and you can come and spend a couple of hours, and just hang out on your laptop. I think maybe 50 to 60% of our customers are people that come to our cafe or our bar essentially to work. So they'll come in the morning, they'll open their laptop, they'll sit there for a couple of hours, they'll have their coffee, tea, they'll have lunch there. And then eventually, like by the evening time, if they do hang out all day, they'll move on to maybe drinking a beer or having something else. But it's a very, very strong kind of past maybe 4 years or something that people, and especially because it's a very internet world these days, people will go somewhere outside of an office to work, especially the creative bunch. You know, you have your artists, your graphic designers. People don't want to sit in an office too much anymore. They'd rather be in an environment that has music, that has other people, interactions. And then one plus point with being in a cafe and working is you get to meet a lot of new people, and that's kind of what Flipside was about. You know, where you could come in and you'd know at least 2 or 3 people that you've seen around. You'd start off a conversation. You'd find out what they did. You'd explain what you do. You know, so you get a nice mix of cultures, a mix of different professions, and who knows where that can take most people. You know, so it's definitely a plus point.
All right, so Ravi, thanks very much for coming in. We wish you all the best with Flipside Cafe and all the very best with your new venture, Barsoom, that you're opening up a new pub over there. Thanks so much for joining in the conversation. Komal, final word to you. As far as what Ravi is pointing out, that it's not just a point of going out and meeting, and it's also people are working out of cafes and pubs.
Yes.
So that certainly has changed, hasn't it?
True.
It's very interesting. Do you think this is sustainable? Do you see this happening more often, or do you see this as a one-off of some kind of a sitcom?
I hope it is that goes on, because I don't know if you know that J.K. Rowling wrote her entire series of Harry Potter books out of a cafe. And so it is a place where, if it's a place where you can be productive, where you can let your creative juices flow, why not? And you get a coffee, and if you're above the drinking age, then you can get a drink. So it's about creating ease, whether it's the environment, whether it's the food, whether it's the TV show. It's about creating ease. And to remember that we are talking about a very small section of society in India. So it is in many ways alien to what India was, is. Still, 90% of India does not live like this. But if the 10% is enjoying it and it is something that they can sustain, great.
All right, on that note, we'll have to wrap up. Thanks so much for joining us, Komal, and thanks so much for joining us, Ravi. On that note, we'll wrap up. But of course, what are your views about the sitcom effect from cafes to pubs? Do you like to go to pubs? Do you think they're not good for Indian society, as many might point out? So what is your opinion? Share it with us. IndiaPostLive.com is the name of the website, or hashtag IndiaPostLive to your tweets to join in the conversation. The conversation, of course, continues right over here, so stay tuned.